Welcome aboard. It is episode 97 of the J.R. Hef Show, and I am very happy to have Kevin Carroll, who is the Director of Operations and Maintenance for the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project with Dominion Energy, on board today to talk about that incredible project that I think some of us ancillarily or maybe tangentially know or have thought about, but don't really understand how much of a incredible project this actually is. They just completed about a year ago. Their two, I'll call them test platforms, two test turbines of 6 megawatts each. They've gone ahead and run that line from about 27 nautical miles offshore into Virginia Beach. And they're generating electricity and upwards for about 300 homes. What they want to do is by 2026, since they have the proof and concept already done, by 2026, go ahead and put another 180 turbines out there. And so Kevin walks us through this entire process. He takes us back to 2014, how it all began, and walks us through how Department of Energy is involved and why this is such an important project for the region. Good conversation with Kevin. I really hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. And so let's get underway with Kevin Carroll of Dominion Energy. Kevin Carroll, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. The Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project is something I have been interested in for a very long period of time. And having the Director of Operations and Maintenance, you, on the program to talk about this really important project to the Commonwealth of Virginia that I don't think enough people are aware of is fantastic. So again, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be able to talk about the project, not just for Virginia, but for really the entire country. Offshore wind is new, and I'm sure lots of people have lots of questions. So I'm very happy that you're giving us the venue today.
Awesome. Truly appreciate it. Now, leadership is nothing new to you. You are a retired Coast Guard captain who most recently actually commanded Virginia's sector for the Coast Guard, which is an awesome responsibility to have. You did that for 3 years. You were the deputy for 2 years. You did that. You were the deputy 2 years before that. And then for 3 years before that, you were the chief of prevention. So altogether, 7 years with the Virginia sector. So you know this sector, you know this area really, really well. Tell us a little bit about what the Virginia sector does and why that helped prepare you for this next responsibility.
So Coast Guard Sector Virginia has jurisdiction over all Coast Guard missions from the North Carolina-Virginia border to the Maryland-Virginia border, the interior of the Chesapeake Bay, James River, York River, Rappahannock, and the Elizabeth River, of course. So a lot of that was really search and rescue, maritime law enforcement, aids to navigation, vessel safety and security, but also facilitating safe and secure commerce. Coast Guard is really a wonderful organization. We protect people from the sea, and we protect the sea from people. So with Dominion Energy in this project, I get to actually do both.
Fantastic. Now, You say with this current position, you get to do both as Director of Operations and Maintenance. Describe that role for us. What do you oversee for this project?
So right now we have two 6 megawatt turbines, which are offshore, 27 miles offshore of Virginia right now. They are producing about 12 megawatts apiece. That's enough power for about 3,000 homes. And we have men and women who are going out to them on a pretty consistent basis to perform routine maintenance, perform emergency maintenance. And my job is to make sure that they get out there safely, make sure they get out there well equipped, and they have all the processes at their fingertips to be able to ensure that these wind turbines are running efficiently and they are producing energy.
So the cool thing that a lot of folks might not be aware of is that it's been about a year since these turbines came online, which I think was earlier than anticipated, which was great. But let's go back to the Wayback Machine and talk about how this all got started. And I'm looking right here at the Bureau of Energy and Management Office of Renewable Energy Programs and their 2014 environmental assessment about this particular program. And Here's the deal. They say the purpose of the advanced technology demonstration projects, that's important, demonstration project, right, is to verify innovative designs and technology developments and validate full performance and cost under real operating and market conditions. The proposed action would fulfill DOE's goals of installing innovative offshore wind systems in United States waters in the most rapid and responsible manner possible, and expedite the development and deployment of innovative offshore wind energy systems with a credible potential for lowering the levelized cost of energy. So that's what this really is. This is kind of a proof in concept study for Dominion Energy and, quite frankly, the Department of Energy to ensure that it actually works. So it started off small. Like you said, it's two 6 megawatt turbines. Tell us how it's going. Is the proof in concept actually working?
It absolutely is. And I think when all is said and done, when offshore wind is fully brought to this country, I think people are going to look at the pilot project and really say that, there was high expectations, and I think we've exceeded them already throughout the year in terms of the electrical production for these two turbines. In terms of availability and capacity factor, they have exceeded expectations. They've performed very well. Obviously, when it comes down to the availability of wind, that's why I remind people when our capacity factor is high for a particular month, people get happy and they say we got more wind than we expected. So, but that is good. More importantly, from a logistical standpoint, more importantly from safety processes, we've proven that we can do this over the course of a year, from construction to 1 full year of operation. And actually, it's October 15th. Was their first day of actually producing energy and bringing it ashore. So that's the day that I consider that it's their birthday. I think of them as wind babies in some cases because their 6-month checkup, people were very interested in how they were doing. The proof of concept has borne fruit across the environmental side. We've done numerous environmental studies, scour protection surveys, ROV surveys. We've used drone technology to be able to do assessments of the blades and the nacelle without putting people in harm's way. There has been a tremendous amount of sharing going back and forth between the other developers and also, of course, to BOEM, who's really are from the regulatory side and the federal side. They're the ones that we are looking to please. But really, Departments of Mine, Minerals, and Energy for Virginia, now the Virginia Department of Energy, that they technically own the lease, and we are operating the lease for them. So this right now, after 1 year, I can say is conclusively is a success.
That's awesome to hear. I'm going to play with my toy here and do a little production factor, and I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you will be able to see this as well. And so we'll go hit share screen. This is just so that the folks can have an opportunity to actually see where this is, and hopefully you'll be able to see this too. So can you see the map on the screen?
I absolutely can.
Okay, so here we are. This is basically the entrance to the Chesapeake Bay. And can you describe what we're looking at here?
Okay, so I would say from the western side of the photograph, you see obviously Cape Henry, and you see the approaches. The southern approach and up to the northern approach. And as you work obviously further to the east, there's Chesapeake Light, and then about 27 statute miles offshore, you'll see those blue blocks, which signifies the aliquots or the areas for the pilot project. Now, those two turbines are towards the southernmost part of that. They're about 0.6 nautical miles apart. They're 6 megawatts apiece, and those have been really from our how do we do construction? We learned a lot of lessons for construction. And from the operational side, during a full year of operation, we've been doing the normal routine maintenance that goes with these turbines. We've responded to some non-routine maintenance for things that we needed to go out and fix. And it has worked. It has worked very well. The area to the east of those blue blocks, those yellow blocks, that is the commercial area. That is the commercial lease area. A lot of people ask us, say, well, why did Dominion Energy choose that particular area? It wasn't chosen. This is leased by the Bureau of Offshore Energy Management. They designated that as a good location where offshore wind could possibly be. And this was way back in 2013, purchased the lease. We won, we bid for it, and we have been working on this project back since then. So this project really, a lot of folks say, well, this has been the last few years. Dominion's been working on this for quite some time.
So again, for folks who aren't actually watching this on YouTube or, streaming on the website, just for descriptive purposes, you have the Chesapeake Lighthouse, which is what do you say, about 12 nautical miles
Correct.
Off the coast, and then directly to the east of that, about another 15 nautical miles is what we're talking about. And we're looking at, test my navigator days here. Are we looking at about 13 fathoms of water? Is that about right?
The maximum depth of the lease area would be to about 110 feet to as little as about 70 feet. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I needed to bring that up because I want you to talk about the construction of this. This is quite an incredible undertaking, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen, and we'll get back to our regular conversation here. We're talking first of all, above the water line, how high is the turbine?
So the two 6 megawatt turbines that we have right now, from the water line to the blade tip, is about over 500 feet.
So we're talking about 500 feet and then into at least 100 feet of water. So we're talking 600 feet. And then what depth into the floor?
Into the ocean bottom. It goes into about 80 feet.
80 feet. So 180. So we're talking about like 680 feet worth of just a pipe. It's again, and about how wide is the turbine base?
For the width, I would say it is about 45 feet at its max, and it does taper as it gets up to the neck.
Sure.
I may not be 100% accurate on that. If you want to really understand offshore wind, this is the way to think about the whole asset out there. If you have the cable, and then you have the foundation. The foundation is the part that actually goes into the ocean bottom. On top of the foundation, you have a transition piece, which fits on it like a sleeve. The white tower, that is the monopile. The monopile, in a lot of sense, has the cable run, which runs down to the ocean floor. And there's also several components. There's the ladder from getting to the top to the bottom. There's also an elevator. At the very top is the nacelle. The nacelle is really where all the power generation occurs. And then you have the hub and then the blades. All of those different components are all really prefabricated offshore. So the construction of it really takes place, an awful lot of it on shore. Once it gets offshore, it's those pieces in very much like building block fashion.
That's pretty amazing. How is it actually shipped out there? What are there special vessels that are used in order to facilitate the construction?
Correct. In terms of, again, back to the pilot project and the things that we learned, those two 6 megawatt turbines were built through a partnership with Ørsted, which is one of the world leaders in offshore wind. And in particular, the construction vessel, the wind turbine installation vessel that they used was foreign flagged. So they could not pick up the components from our shore and bring them offshore because of the Jones Act. And that is one very valuable lesson we learned. Many of the components that I just described were pre-staged in Halifax in Nova Scotia. So from a speed, time, distance, logistics standpoint, that we knew that wasn't going to work for a large scale wind lease area. For two, it worked. It's not going to nearly work as well. And that's why Dominion Energy took the initiative and started construction on the first U.S. flag Jones Act compliant wind turbine installation vessel, which is being built down in Brownsville, Texas right now. Its name is the Charybdis.
Okay, that is cool. I'm testing my memory here, but I seem to recall it was either Amazon or Google when this conversation first started, saying that the electrical grid, in order to support an offshore wind, needed to be improved, or it needed to be further refined and developed. That is something Dominion Energy, I think, has taken on. How do you get the power from 27 nautical miles offshore into the electrical grid that's here in the Commonwealth?
Well, let's talk about the commercial project. I think that's probably the most substantial, because the 26 megawatts, there's cabling that comes ashore. It comes ashore right near the state military reservation near Camp Pendleton, and it goes into electrical substation. It goes directly into the grid. When we're talking the 2.6 gigawatts of energy that'll be generated by the commercial project, it'll be a bit more. So we'll have approximately 180 wind turbine generators within that lease area that you showed earlier for the commercial project. About a third of those will go each into an offshore substation. That offshore substation will do some power conversion, and then there will be inter-array cables that will be connected to each offshore substation. The offshore substation will have an export cable, which will once again come ashore near the state military reservation or Camp Pendleton and come into the grid. After it goes through some portions on land, it will actually go into the Fentress substation over in Chesapeake. So that's one of the benefits that Dominion Energy has. We are not going to be a developer who has to have a power purchase agreement with another power supplier. We already have existing infrastructure. It's just building the turbines, the offshore substations offshore, running the cable, which is about 2 meters down, and bringing it ashore to one of our existing substations. I, in fact, live about 3 miles, actually 2 miles from that substation. So it'll be coming ashore in Virginia Beach. It'll be coming to a substation in Chesapeake, and it'll go right directly into the grid.
So I'm going to test my memory here a little bit again and see whether or not I'm accurate. You can please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of how electricity works from the various sources, whether it's coal, natural gas, nuclear, et cetera, is it has to go to some sort of interchange to be sold. And it has to be at a sufficient price in order to maintain the capability. So where I'm going with this is I know for a fact that 3 Mile Island, as the nuclear power station in Pennsylvania, had to close because it wasn't making any money for Exelon. And so my question then becomes, is the power that's going to be generated from these wind farms, does it also go into that exchange, the PJM exchange?
It absolutely does. It will go into PJM exchange. And I think I hear where you're kind of going with this. And what I would offer is, what are the benefits for the U.S. getting into offshore wind now is that we have been able to derive the benefits and lessons learned from decades of experience over in Europe. Obviously, offshore wind is new to the United States. It's not new to the world, especially right. Europe. And that is part of what we've been able to do. And we've been able to watch that levelized cost of energy. How much does it cost to maintain these assets and provide power to the public? It's come down every year consistently. Yeah. Now, the expectation is obviously with this is going to be about an $8 billion project. When we do make this expenditure, I would say the Virginia ratepayers can expect that their bills would increase to about $4 per bill. Now, and then people sometimes their mouths go wide open when I say that, and very often it's at public meetings, and I'm looking down on their hand, they're holding a cup of Starbucks, and I ask them how much they paid for that, and I said, for this, we are constructing a energy production facility which will be free fuel the wind, and we will be taking the equivalent. This project, 660,000 homes. That's how much the commercial project will be providing power for, and that'll be the equivalent of taking 1 million non-EV cars off the road. That's pretty impressive in terms of what we're going to expect for the environment, and plus the job creation.
Well, that's very significant. I know the military is looking at trying to green itself as well, but you can't necessarily replace gas turbine engines on destroyers and cruisers overnight and develop new platforms. And so for our national defense, we know that we're going to need fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. So creating alternative energy sources here at home in a more stable environment, it certainly makes sense. I'm an all of the above guy. I'm an advocate for nuclear and for wind. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that we need to do. And it also goes towards energy independence. But that does lead to a question that I have about what happened here between 2008 and 2010, just a little bit north of the actual location of the commercial project, was what at least formerly was known as Lease Sale 220. for oil and natural gas exploration out in the Mid-Atlantic. Now, I know we put a pause on that in 2010 during the Obama administration. I understand during the Trump administration that there were ideas that were floated as to maybe doing this. Has the concept of oil and natural gas and wind possibly, working in the same space or together, has that been considered?
As far as I know from my dealings with the project, it has not. And that's, I would say, rather limited. I've been told to be fixated on the safety and first and foremost, the safety for the personnel who are going to be working, onshore and offshore. But the distant second to that would be the performance for offshore wind and making offshore wind work here in the United States. And I completely understand, that's where in the beginning where we talk about offshore wind is new. I think new things tend to make people a little bit wary. I don't think our country, and probably rightfully so, doesn't want it to have too much change too fast. But when it comes down to offshore wind, it will be introduced, as I said, from 2013 to 2026. That's how long it's going to take for that first commercial area to be introduced. Will there be gas turbines onshore producing energy in 2026? Absolutely. Will Surrey nuclear power station still be producing? Absolutely. Are we starting to increase our footprint for solar? Yes. We're starting to build out our capacity and our energy diversity, which I think is critically important for our nation. As you can see, when you put your eggs in one basket, I think that's a disaster. I love offshore wind. I'm by no means a person who will ever say everything has to be offshore wind all the time.
Well, the Mid-Atlantic region, if you look at the Energy Information Agency's consumption, Mid-Atlantic region just eclipses all other regions regarding its demand for electricity. So the more we can generate, the more we can contribute to the region, certainly the better for sure. A question to kind of go along with the oil and natural gas question that I asked was really based upon the assessments that were done by the Bureau of Energy Management. And basically what I read is that it was not going to have any significant impact on things like military exercises, shipping, the Maritimes, environmentally, birds, mammal, migration, bird migration. Is that your understanding, and how do you sense the project in terms of, now that you've got two out there, what is its impact, if any?
Well, what I would say is I'm taking nothing for granted. And I would say it would be impossible to introduce 180 plus 3 offshore substations of structures 27 miles offshore of one of the busiest ports in the United States, both commercially and for DoD, and say it's not introducing risk. So I'm not taking anything for granted. Part of my job is working through what we call the navigation safety risk assessment, is making a very clear delineation of what risks are being introduced specifically across commercial, DoD, recreational, commercial fishing, and trying to mitigate those risks as much as possible. Does offshore wind introduce new risks? Yes, it does. Absolutely. Can those risks be mitigated? 100%. And that's one of the things we're committed to. We're working very closely with all port stakeholders to be able to make that happen. And I think that's critically important. Back to the environment, I've heard a lot of folks say, hey, this is going to be great for recreational fishing. This is not going to be an impact on birds. We're not taking that for granted either. For over the past year, we've been working with a company called Normando on a bird and bat survey, making absolutely certain that birds and bats are not going to be impacted by our offshore wind project. Onshore wind is a little bit different, obviously. Offshore wind 27 miles. But so far to this point, we can say pretty conclusively, because we've had cameras pointed up at the wind turbines monitoring birds and bats, we haven't had one strike. And being one of the few people who's ever climbed both of them, I can say that one of the things that amazes me is that there's an absence of guano or bird poop on the top of both of them. So, but this is something that, again, this is going to be 1 year and we're going to turn that off. We are committed to working with this project through pre-construction, through construction, through operation and decommissioning. That's for the environment. That's working with other ocean users. That's 100% to make this project really what it needs to be. and it needs to be done the right way. We're building an industry in the United States, and I tell this to our folks all the time. It's critically important that we get it right, from the people that we hire, from the processes that we generate, and that we always approach this with a lot of humility. I think you probably know, you've been with the Navy. Anybody who goes out to sea and feels bold and then a little bit of humility about being out there is probably in shoal waters. One of the things that I was expecting, but I was quite frankly amazed, we have been doing what we call foundation and scour protection surveys. So we have an ROV submersible that goes down and takes cameras. And we provide this back to the Bureau of Offshore Energy Management just to see how the turbines are doing beneath the water and how the rocks that make up the scour that protects them around the foundation are doing. The one thing we were not expecting is one of the ROVs came back and said, look, I think we're going to have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? He said that I have a lot of difficulty seeing the turbines at all because of all the fish. And we looked at the footage, and sure enough, it was washed out for a good several minutes because there's so much marine life at the base of the turbines. And I said, that's not a problem. That's something that we really need to tout, because that is obviously, you're going to put a structure in the water. Marine life is going to grow on it, and then smaller fish come, and then the bigger fish come. And the reports from the recreational community so far have been off the charts as far as being able to go out there and fish.
Let's talk a little bit about what you had mentioned there regarding the brave souls that are actually going out and doing this work. I got to tell you, I could not do it. There, you said you climbed to the top of one of these towers. Not this guy. So talk about where you're hiring folks and who is interested in doing this kind of work. And do you have any partnerships with maybe any local training organizations or universities?
Through the Virginia Clean Economy Act, that is one of the things we're looking to is bring the benefits locally. And when it comes down to hiring, we're looking very closely at the military for folks that have been obviously with the Coast Guard or with the Navy or any other the DoD elements. Looking at the commercial industry as well, oil and gas industry. There's lots of folks who are looking to make the move over to renewables. And it's going to be pretty similar work. We'll have an offshore supply vessel, which will be offshore for about 2 weeks at a time. And that's where the men and women for this project will work and live. And they'll be moving back and forth between turbines, doing routine maintenance and also doing emergency maintenance. As far as training institutions, I was trained to climb the turbines down in Houma, Louisiana through Global Wind Organization training. They're looking to bring that here to Virginia. I applaud that. Obviously, for me, for operations and maintenance manager, I want to be able to make sure that, we're keeping costs down. We're sending people here to local training schools. I know Centura College, I know Tidewater Community College, I also know that Mid-Atlantic Maritime are all looking to start generating programs here in the Tidewater area. And I think it's a phenomenal opportunity that goes back into really the job creation. It's not just going to be technicians working for Dominion Energy. It's going to be people working within the supply chain. It will be people working within the training institutions that are here locally. It'll be people driving the trucks that deliver the materials. All across the board, there's going to be a tremendous job growth to the tune of, during construction, it'll be about 900 jobs, which will be construction will be from 2024 to 2026. 2026 on, we're looking at this project a year, 1,100 jobs. It's going to be generating per year, and that's going to be pretty great. This region, really the Commonwealth of Virginia, has always been a maritime region. The Port of Virginia is phenomenal, generates $242 million per day, one of the largest fleet concentration area for the Navy in the world, an incredible commercial port, the Coast Guard, commercial fishermen, recreational fishermen. I can't think of any better place to be and kicking off offshore wind, not just for the turbines themselves, but also the supply chain.
Yeah, let's talk about the supply chain. Is the anticipation that Hampton Roads and maybe even further inland to Virginia is going to become the coastal hub or the hub for offshore wind? That
is the hope. That is certainly the hope. And I think we just had the IPF International Partnership Forum, which was held in Richmond, Virginia, back in August, back in September. And I think that a lot of the suppliers, people, who are worldwide, are starting to look at and say, hey, offshore wind is becoming more of a reality in the United States. Vineyard Wind, their acceptance, working for our notice of intent, the notice of intent that was issued to Kitty Hawk Wind, which is just the south. Throughout the entire industry, it really looks like this is it's going to happen. It's going to be an incredibly viable industry. And I think many of the organizations that would be supporting the supply chain would be looking towards those signs. And I think they've seen it. But I think that there's so much that Virginia has to offer to a potential company, not just here, but, also, out through the Piedmont area and all throughout the Virginia itself. Just because of really back to logistics, everything really comes down to logistics, speed, time, distance, getting the people, processes, and equipment on scene on time. I think in the long run, what you'll end up seeing is probably not just one hub, but probably many throughout the East Coast. And depending on how floating offshore wind goes over in the West Coast, this is going to be a tremendous industry for this country.
Actually, you mentioned other hubs. North Carolina is developing as well, correct?
Correct. Kitty Hawk Wind.
Kitty Hawk Wind. Awesome. So, it is a little bit of intellectual curiosity. You got to figure that Ørsted has been involved in building these turbines in the North Sea, correct? Is that an accurate statement? And
That's
so
correct.
We know that the wind and the waves and everything like that is just absolutely incredible up in the North Sea. And the turbines, I guess they handle it, right? They can hack it.
They can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question, the curious question, I mean, it almost seems like a little bit of a non-starter, but clearly, Category 5 hurricanes are going to be no problem for these guys. Actually,
the turbines are rated for a Category 2.
Oh, for a Category 2. So Category 5 might be a problem for these guys. So
I
what
think
happens?
Category 5 is a problem for anything.
I completely, totally get that. That was not a criticism or anything. It was just an assumption on my part. So let's talk a little bit then about a little bit of the mechanics of these things. I would presume that you don't necessarily, do you break them or do you allow them to freewheel off the turbine? Like, do they disconnect from the electrical generation as they get to excessive speeds? Tell me how that works.
So the turbines will cut in at about 10 miles an hour. That's when they'll start producing energy. Obviously, it takes time for the blades to be able to turn. They will cut off at 56 miles an hour. That's where people are like, well, actually, somebody asked me at a public meeting, they said, well, I guess during a hurricane, you generate lots of energy. And I said, well, no, it doesn't work that way. Obviously, there's mechanical limitations for everything. The turbines are very intuitive, and they're pretty amazing, where they will point themselves through pitch and yaw. Yaw is the direction that the nacelle is turned to. Pitch is just like the same thing, the pitching for the blades. So they will turn to the best possible direction and pitch to be able to generate electricity up until a point. When the wind speeds get too high, then they'll go into what I call protective mode. So they will actually put themselves into the best possible direction and pitch to be able to direct them to protect themselves. And people say, well, I don't get that. And I say, well, at some point in your life, I think everybody has driven in the car and they've put their hand outside the window. Now, when your hand is like that, flat against the wind is cutting on the leading edge. It goes above and below, and it is not moving your hand very much at all. When you start to pitch it, that's when it starts to take your hand back, and that's when people go like that. So that is part of our process, is to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do, and that's one of the things that we've tested this year. Have they been greatly tested? Have we been at that point where we were looking at Category 2s? Not this year, not at all. Have we had 70-mile-an-hour winds out there sustained? Yes, we have. And especially at that height where we're talking about where the blades are. And they've performed better than admirably. They've been really phenomenal. And all of the functions for those turbines have been spot on when it comes down to what they are supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. So Siemens Gamesa makes a good turbine.
So let's talk finally. I'll ask two more questions. First, we've mentioned a little bit some of the partnerships that we have. You mentioned Orsted, you mentioned Siemens. Who are some of the other, and some of the local universities like ODU, Virginia Tech, JMU, et cetera. What are some of your other major players, major partners that you have in this project?
Business Network for Offshore Wind. And I was actually proud to be a part of their Foundation to Blade class. Now, their purpose is to really bring folks into the offshore wind industry. That could be a developer, that could be a supplier, and I attended obviously as a developer. And their class, it was every Friday for a month, and it was about 6 hours a day, and it was really walking through a project from really lease selection all the way to decommissioning, and it really was pretty incredible. And they were the primary sponsor for the IPF. And they have been really a fantastic way of bringing all of the different developers together. Kitty Hawk Wind is through a company called Avangrid. They're another developer, worldwide developer. There's really partnerships with Orsted. And that's one of the things I'll really applaud, I would say, really all of us in the early stages. That people say, well, they're your competitors. I would say maybe to a point you could say that, but I think in a greater sense that we're really looking at this collaboratively. Obviously, there's things internally, intellectual property that we can't share, but there are things from the safety side that we are sharing right off the bat because we want people to be safe. We want offshore wind to succeed. If there are things from the security side, cybersecurity is a huge part of what we are going to be doing. The Colonial Pipeline incident, it woke a lot of people up. It opens a lot of eyes. Our eyes were already wide open. Through NERC standards, cybersecurity protection standards, we're already there. So that's one of the things we understand how critical that is, not just to our economy, but to our safety and to our security. So we are collaborating heavily to make sure that this industry comes to our country safely and securely.
Ideally, 2026, you're looking at having 180 turbines come online. Is that correct? So the process over the next 5 years, what can the public expect, both in terms of hiring, in terms of production, in terms of supply chain, in terms of maybe public meetings and communication and information? Just kind of walk me through the whole gamut here of the next 5 years in your expectations.
So the next 5 years are going to be very busy from the regulatory permitting side. They'll also be busy from the contract side. They'll also be busy from the developing of processes. Construction starts in spring of 2024. And people say, well, what are you going to do until then? Lots, an awful lot. As far as the public goes, I really applaud you for giving us the venue tonight. I very much appreciate it. To go on the Bureau of Offshore Energy Management's website, you get to look at Dominion Energy's construction and operations plan. It's there for everybody to see. And we received the notice of intent. We received comments back on that already. We are getting ready to file our supplemental filing for that construction and operations plan. That's because this is a federal project. It is in federal waters. That means the public does get the opportunity to, one, be informed, two, to make comments. Back to the navigation safety risk assessment I mentioned before. I thought when we were finished with it, internally, it was good. We released it to the public, and now we've received input back. Now it's going to be great. It gets greater every time that we have that input. Where obviously some people, will ask, I would say, relatively simple questions or simple comments, but a lot of those comments have made us really look and say, wow, that this is something that we've considered, but not to the depth that they've asked us to. That's why I think really under the Administrative Procedures Act, this public process of really working through the permitting process, I think gives us an incredible opportunity to really make our good plan a great plan. So there will be a tremendous amount of input that'll be coming across. If you go on coastalvawind.com, that's through Dominion Energy. We put up notices all the time. We put up different pictures. Actually, the video I mentioned before with all the fish, we put that up on there. So if you go to the fishery section, you can see that. But we'll be doing surveys of the bottom over the next 2 years, some for geotechnical and geosurvey work. Some of it is for unexploded ordnance. And then we'll really start the pre-staging and working on executing contracts, bringing the components here, and that's when the construction begins. And that's really when it gets real, and that's when it gets fun too.
Awesome. Well, Kevin Carroll, you kind of answered my last question there, but we'll repeat it for everybody. CoastalVAWind.com, correct? That's
Correct.
where folks need to go to find out all things regarding this Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind project. Cannot thank you enough for your time tonight. I know we went a little long with this conversation, but I think it was an important conversation to be had because it affects everybody here in Hampton Roads. The 2.1 plus million people are however big our region is. And it's actually a conversation we need to have more of because it's honestly, I think people know what's going on, but they don't know how critically important it is to our economy and our future here in the region. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the program today.
I thank you. And again, from serving 26 years with the tremendous organization where, my mom always said, whatever you choose to do in this world, make sure you're making an impact. Make sure that, you're doing something that you can look back and say, I helped the people next to me. And that was the Coast Guard. I had no visions that I would be doing this with Dominion Energy now, where it's very much the same impact. I think we'll look back on this, not just for this generation, but several generations from now, and realize that this was a very good and noble project to be a part of. And thank you for having me on tonight.
Awesome. Kevin Carroll, he is the Director of Operations and Maintenance for the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project for Dominion Energy. Kevin, you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.